All right, so next video from False Swipe Gaming. I think it'll be a pretty interesting watch. I've seen a couple of videos before about cheaters. Goodness gravy. See how this guy got caught. How would cheaters sabotage a 500-player Pokemon tournament? Sounds interesting. All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
There's cheating, and then there's what this player did. They were talented, successful, and beloved, and they wound up going to extreme lengths to rig and sabotage a major tournament of over 500 players. The
wow.
biggest cheating scandal ever, with the most offenses ever committed in any Pokemon tournament, VGC or singles. Offenses ranging from match fixing to playing on an alternate account. We're going to explore the tournament that was the site of the cheating, as well as the general online tournament culture, then look at who the player was, the mysterious way the tournament unfolded, the chaos that exploded in the wake of the cheating allegations, and of course, the how and why of the cheating itself. Our story begins with the tournament itself, the official Smogon tournament, or OST.
In case y'all don't know what Smogon is, or Smogon is, yeah, it is like the biggest competitive Pokemon website out there. You know, if you want to, if you ever want to get into competitive Pokemon, Smogon is the place to start. They break Pokemon down to right down to the stats, the nature, the moveset, everything. They have these incredibly detailed tier lists and everything. So to think that someone became part of a Smogon tournament, but still felt the need to cheat. Are you kidding me? Smogon is a huge website. It's been around for a very, very long time. It's almost as old as Bulbapedia and Cerebi and stuff, right? Possibly even older. Yeah, I almost want to say that all competitive Pokemon started here at Smogon.
OST was the first and remains the most defining individual tournament on Smogon, and has been since the site was founded over 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
The format is simple. There are open signups for a single elimination tournament of standard play, also known as the current generation of OU. It featured some of the best, most intense gameplay in competitive Pokemon history, and as it tends to be the case with any tournament, it had its fair share of controversy, but those usually revolved around luck, or so-called undeserved wins. The usual. The only time cheating ever really happened was in the form of ghosting, or telling someone.
Yeah, there is a lot of cheaters and speedrunners and stuff. It's like, come on, man. Like, if you've already made it this far, why do you need to cheat? Like, in a tournament, if money's on the line, I can see how someone might be motivated to cheat, and I don't excuse it, but, you know, I can see the motivation. But in speedrunning, there's no real reward for speedrunning. You know, there's no trophy, no reward or anything, except for clout, you know, and getting your name on a website. But even then, it's like, why? Just learn to do it legitimately if you want the clout that badly.
Someone else what to do in their battle, except this only really occurred in teams tournaments where players draft teams of players to collectively try to win. The reason OST, like Smogon's other individual tournaments, generally saw less cheating was because there was less incentive. If multiple people cheat to win a team tournament, they all share the win. In an individual tournament, you don't get to share in the win. This is not to say such things didn't happen, but nowhere near the scale of the team tournaments, since being seen as the best was such a point.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes cheaters are so bad that it is hilarious when cheaters get caught, and especially when they try to explain themselves. On the topic of cheating and speedruns, I mean, I remember how, you know, there was like a blindfold run of Super Mario 64 someone did, you know, air quotes blindfold, right? There are some people who can and do legitimately. Oh, sorry, I totally had a brain fart there. What was I was in the middle of an. I'm a total airhead. Yes. Okay, yes. Sorry. Yes, a blindfold Super Mario 64 speedrun. Thank you, Pikachu. Yes. Oh, yes, her too. I remember that. Yeah. There was also another gamer who claimed to be a really tough boss blindfolder, right? And she even, you know, quote, did it on stream. And for a while, people actually believed her, right? You know, they're like, okay, fine, that's fair. But then people really deeply analyzed the video and learned that she cheated, even though she was quote unquote blindfolded. And that's probably a subject for another video. I'm getting sidetracked here. I'm about to go yapping into it. But let's get back to the video here about the incentives of cheating in a tournament.
Of pride, the players winning these tournaments wouldn't want their accomplishment tainted by whispers they had gotten there by cheating. Well, until 2015. The official Smogon Tournament's 11th edition saw the most outrageous cheating scandal in competitive Pokemon history. Everything that came before is positively tame in comparison, and a decade later, nothing has matched it, which really is impossible to imagine. OST Gate, as it was named, was a case of such corruption, many wondered if online competitive Pokemon could ever be taken seriously again. And beyond that, many wondered just what would drive someone to cheat this much in the first place. It's at this point our story begins with the introduction of our main character, Blue. No, not blue as in the color, but blue as in Blue Regard Q Kazoo from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Blue joined the competitive scene in Generation 4, quickly becoming established as knowledgeable about the game, an excellent contributor, a well-liked community presence.
Yeah, I've heard of this guy, but I didn't know that about this cheating scandal here. But yeah, this guy I've heard of. Let's see what he did.
And even a trustworthy authority figure rising through the ranks to influential positions of power, most notably tournament director and the highest moderator position on the site, administrator. Blue didn't have much impact as a tournament player though, but that changed in Gen 5 where Blue, having improved immensely in the shadows, came seemingly out of nowhere to win the Smogon Frontier, a prestigious individual tournament designated official, meaning you earned a trophy on your profile if you won. Official tournaments were the kinds that were taken the most seriously by the best players, and Frontier took it a step further with its gauntlet-style challenge format, so difficult that for some time it was considered unbeatable, or close to it, since you had to beat over 10 of the best players on the site in current generation OU, with a maximum 2 losses allowed. Winning Frontier meant automatic establishment as a top player, but Blue didn't stop there, continuing to put up elite performances in the biggest tournaments for the rest of the generation. And then Generation 6 came around. In XY, Blue really elevated in both skill and reputation, becoming not just a top player, but a contender for the top player. Unquestionably one of the 2 single best players around, alongside Blue's friend and rival McMegan. They were head and shoulders among even the other best players of the time. Blue was so highly
Okay, so I wonder what happened then. Were he and his friend helping each other out? They mentioned ghosting earlier in the video. Could it be that Blue was ghosting then? Not as good as he said he was? I don't understand. You already have prestige on that site. Why would you sabotage it all just for a little trophy on your profile picture?
regarded, they became the most expensive player by far in the Smogon Premier League, one of the team tournaments previously alluded to, where managers bid theoretical credits to draft a team together. Blue cost 40k of the 140k budget allotted to every team. The next most expensive player in the tier, longtime tournament veteran 6A9 Ace Matador, cost 23,000. Beyond being admired for skill, Blue was popular among the community for being polite, intelligent, and well-spoken. Not traits the average competitive player is known for, as well as even flashing an occasional mischievous sense of humor. In competitive Pokemon terms, Blue had it all. However, there were a few things. 1, while Blue was unquestionably a top 2 player of the time, Blue was also unquestionably the number 2 to McMegan's number 1. 2, Blue aimed for a feat that was incredibly rare at the time, and remains incredibly impressive even today, a second individual trophy win. Frontier was an incredible achievement, but Blue wanted...
Okay, we're starting to see the motivation now then. Oh, as for how ghosting works, yeah, that's honestly pretty much how it works, really. You know, you're not supposed to get any help when in a tournament, right? But, you know, he could have had a private Discord server open, or open on his phone, you know, and if his buddy knew the moves and stats of the opponent's team, you know, you'll know what to expect. You know, it won't guarantee you a win, but it does give you a huge advantage.
More. Smogon Tour, which consisted of the 3 most recent generations of OU, was considered by many to be the best individual tournament on the site, and it was the one Blue eyed most fervently, coming close with a couple of semifinals appearances, but unable to make it further. 3, while Blue was considered the second best player of the time, many still considered older players of the Generation 4 era, namely Earthworm and Goki, among some others, to be the best of all time. In Blue's own words from a public interview,
"My reasons for playing Pokemon have evolved a lot throughout the years. Right now though, my main reason for playing is to be known as a person people refer to as the best player of my era. Even though there will always be debates regarding who the best player of a certain era was, you usually see similarities in the responses people give. For example, when people discuss 4th generation players, I rarely see anyone mention someone other than Earthworm as the first best player of his era, with others usually being mentioned second.
The full response is much longer.
I guess in the end, some people don't care about monetary gain. They just care about infamy in general, and wanting to be remembered for something. Ego, clout, you know, things like that. Sometimes they're more dangerous motivators than money, aren't they?
But it was also the polite public answer, going on to mention appreciation, not wanting to sound selfish, being a highly competitive person, and so on. Those who knew Blue in private were familiar with the more openly disdainful version, with clear resentment towards those who rated the players of the past more highly. Also notable in this response was the following.
"Sometimes I wish I was under the radar like I was when I first started playing tournaments, because people don't know what to expect from you, which isn't the case for me anymore.
Not long after this interview, it was early January 2015 when Blue took a tough, luck-influenced loss in the later rounds of the playoffs of the official ladder tournament, coming up short for another trophy, and that appeared to be a sort of last straw, with Blue now looking to be stepping back from playing as seriously. Deflated by the
Yeah, and if luck was a huge factor in it, Pokemon battles, in these official tournaments that people try to do, many people do try to make it as fair as possible, right? To try and take out as many luck factors as possible. But even then, even if you make it super duper fair as much as you can, luck can still completely screw you over, right? Like they say, if a focus blast either hits or you lose, right? So I imagine it'd be really rough if you lost to something if you lost to an unfortunate miss or to a critical hit or to a flinch, Yeah, that would be pretty rough. And if you're trying to win at least one, I mean, it doesn't excuse it, but I can understand it. You still shouldn't have done it, but I can see the why.
Noxious tournament community as much as the game itself, Blue chose not to play in the official Smogon tournament that was starting up, instead focusing on tournament director duties by generating some of the tournament's pairing as a neutral, non-participating party. Thus, Blue was off to the side when the year's first real dose of tournament drama started rolling in. In round 2 of OST, Crash and Boom Bang, or CBB, another top player and close friend of Blue's, lost. Losing is one thing in a game like Pokemon where anything can happen, making upsets relatively common. But what made it so notorious was the way he lost. Not only did he lose to a completely new player nobody had heard of named Style, he got utterly demolished, losing the best of 3 in 2 games, including one losing 6-0 to a Hidden Power Fire Manaphy that simply led off and swept. Previously, Hidden Power Fire Manaphy was a non-existent set. This was hard.
Oh, and he got swept by that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, if y'all don't know, if you don't know the term sweeping, basically it's, where you have you have your one Pokemon, sometimes your lead Pokemon, and, they have they have powerful moves, the right item moveset. Well, that's not trying to translate it. So, that sweeping means, they take one Pokemon with a powerful moveset, and it'll defeat the entire enemy team entirely by himself, essentially, sweeping up the mess. I'm trying. I wonder is Style Blue, I wonder? Let's see what happens.
Hardly someone counter-teaming CBB's usual style either, because he was notorious for using fast-paced offensive teams and had chosen to mix it up with the defensive squad instead. The odds of this coming together so seamlessly in this particular game was quite extraordinary, but it wouldn't have amounted to anything more than a week's gossip had it not been for what happened again and again. In round 3, Style faced off against another experienced player, Blue Wing, and once again won in 2 games, with another effortless sweep with a set that was even more obscure, Cotton Guard Dragon Dance Mega Altaria, in a—
Oh wow, yeah. Sometimes a really niche strategy can work. I can't see having in a tournament like this though. And Cotton Guard and Dragon Dance to work like this. To try and explain it into English again. Yeah, Cotton Guard. Yeah, it increases the defense stage by 3, and then Dragon Dance increases your speed and attack. So turning your dragon into quite a powerful tank that hits like a truck. I know, Pikachu's, I know. You're like, wait, what? Like, wait, was any of that English? Basically, what he did was a completely unconventional strategy of turning Pretty Dragon into a tank. If it's not a strategy you see often, I can see people being tripped up by it. Especially since Altaria can have a surprisingly good defense stat to work with. She only needs a set of Cotton Guard 1 and a Dragon Dance 1. And once that's set up, she's free to sweep. Yeah, it's not something you see often, I don't think. I think it's why the opponent was caught off guard, because typically there are strategies that work, that many of them use. So when a new strategy comes in, I can see why that would throw people off. I'm talking to a fish here. I'm talking to a fish. Never mind. Let's keep going. See what he says about it.
perfect matchup for it. Then in round 4, Style faced off against another veteran tournament player and friend of Blues, BKC, and the Mega Altaria thing happened again. Suddenly, the player base was abuzz. How did this keep happening? All eyes were officially on this newbie knocking off experienced players in grand style over and over. Round 5 with Radiant Hero 156 as the opponent saw Style's most absurd niche strategy take another unstoppable 6-0 with Nasty Plot Mew baton passing into Mega Ampharos against a hapless stall team. Some among the baffled player base started coming up with conspiracy theories, namely that Style was an alternate account of an experienced player. But these theories were also mostly thrown around in a joking manner. Mostly. What really fed into the hysteria was the fact that Style was a woman. and the player base at the time was pretty much as close as being to 100% male without actually being 100%, as well as having the famous online gamer maturity.
Yeah, honestly, that's also pretty true too. Yeah, a vast majority of competitive players are male. It's almost unheard of that there's a female competitive player, because truthfully, women just aren't into that sort of thing, really. You know, that's something that guys do a lot. I'm a woman. I play competitively in Gen 4, but I never did tournaments or anything, and I never went further than that. So, you know, if this mysterious girl suddenly came in, girl bossing her way through the top, it would invite a lot of scrutiny.
Level that automatically casts suspicion against anyone claiming to be a woman. Though there had been a few players that had pretended to be women before, but there had also been women players as well, rarer though they were on account of the boys club that the internet was for so long, which meant a lot of unwanted attention and even harassment from the especially immature users on the site. Interestingly though, among the few women players was Cholena, who was actually the winner of the first ever official Smogon tournament back in 2005, in the Gen 3 days. This of course has absolutely nothing to do with Pokemon and shouldn't have any bearing on how someone is treated, and the player base has become much more inclusive in more recent years. But at the time, it did play a major role in ramping up the intensity of watching Style continue her rampage through the tournament. She reigned in the crazy stuff for round 6 and 7, but in the semifinals, against YouTube superstar Thunder Blunder, out came the Pursuit Mega Aerodactyl and the non-choice Hidden Power Electric Keldeo. Not as ludicrous as what had become before, but they and the team they were used on were perfect answers to what Blunder brought. Suddenly, all that was standing between Style and the win was the other finalist, White Queen. And here's where the drama really began. On the surface, Style seemed like a prodigy that has solved the game, like a Pokemon equivalent of a child savant who dominates chess grandmasters. But behind the scenes, some players had begun to have funny feelings about what had been going on. There were a lot of coincidences, and Style didn't seem like who she said she was. This really did seem like an alternate account of some player. But how could anyone pull this off? And just as importantly, who would try to pull something like this off? Some weren't sure who it might be, but they certainly knew that something was wrong. Then there were others who knew exactly who they thought it was. Blue. This would be blasphemous to say in public, as accusing such a top-tier player and well-liked person of—
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see what happened now. Blue, quote, sidestepped the tournament, right? But then, if he was actually styled this whole time, yeah, as the tournament organizer, he would know the teams and movesets of his upcoming opponents. Is that what happened? Was Blue styled this whole time? Let's see.
Pulling off cheating on such an absurd scale seemed ridiculous, and then learning that their friends and others had begun to suspect the same things. So how on earth did all these players start making this connection? Well, Style had become friends with Blue, CBB, and their friend Great Asterd, aka Hugo. They claim to have reached out to Style after being impressed by her games early in the tournament. This is no reason to be suspicious in of itself, but that was just the beginning. Blue—
Yeah, certainly clever in a way, yeah, but yeah, just petty and vindictive in a way, just to get a trophy. Mind you, he said he wanted to be remembered, right? You know, that when people think of competitive of his era, they want to think of his name. Cloud does things to people, man. The internet was a mistake. Just to have even a hint of Cloud drives people to do something like this.
Was friends, or at least friendly, with most of Style's opponents, and it was against those opponents that Style had used the insanely specific Pokemon that would almost otherwise never work in the exact matchups they needed. Against other opponents in rounds 1, 6, and 7, Style had used much more safe standard teams. Their playstyle was a more dependable balance, which was exactly like the kind Blue was famous for using. What's more, Blue had been in contact with said friendly opponents at the time of their matchups with Style. Blue had offered help with their teams, as was normal to do with your friends. You'd help them prepare for their tournament games, and they'd do the same with you. It was even normal at the time to talk breezily about the game with your friends as it happened, but not in the asking for advice sense, but just as a form of commentary. So it didn't seem strange that Blue would ask Style's opponents what moves they were planning on making. But with this information at hand, the theory clicked into place. Blue had not only gotten the teams from Style's opponents, but knew exactly when in the best of 3 they would be used.
I don't think Blue was screwing his friends over so much as they were colluding together, perhaps? They were helping Blue cheat, I think?
Allowing the absurdly specific, can't possibly lose counter team to work and not fall flat on its face as it would against anything else. And to really make sure the win was guaranteed, Blue would even ask the opponent what moves they were making. After all, who would think such a respected authority figure and close friend would be conspiring to create such humiliating losses for them? Oh, and remember, Blue had been responsible for making some of the pairings for the tournament, specifically those for the pairings with Blue Wing, BKC, and Radiant Hero 156, which had featured the most ludicrously specific counters. BKC had also noticed that in the second game, the one turn he didn't tell Blue what move he would make was the one turn Style seemed to not know what he was going to do, regardless of how good the move was. Blue Wing also noted not really having talked to Blue much before, which made it all the stranger when Blue reached out to quote-unquote help for the round 3 games against Style. So this conspiracy made sense on paper. Blue was Style. Though theoretically Style could be a real person that Blue was helping cheat, but that thought didn't cross anyone's mind, since Blue would clearly be looking for personal gain and not pulling off the biggest cheating ever for someone else. Either way, there was no evidence. Plus, as suspicion towards Blue grew, there were those that jumped to Blue's defense. Would Blue of all people really cheat?
As for why Blue needed to know the moves, to specifically build a team to counter, people use certain moves and certain Pokemon in the teams to build certain synergies, right? So if you know the moves, and the strategy that your opponent is going for, and then you build your team specifically to counter them, that is how Blue cheated, and Thank you, Aleko. Yes. Put it more simply, yes. It's like you say to your opponent, hey, what move are you going to do? And he says, oh, I'm going to do paper. Okay, you're playing paper. Then you go to your alternate account and make a scissors team, There I am wobbling away. And Aleko put the perfect metaphor. Yeah, but the pros did realize it's why it started to catch on. A single upset, it's fine. It happens. Sometimes that happens. Yeah, but then Style went on to do not just one more upset, but 2 more upsets for a total of 3 upsets. Sure, people get salty and look too far into it. It could just be luck, but it could also just be a cheater. Yeah.
And not just cheat, but cheat in this unprecedented extent. Well, the answer to that was yes. There were those in the know who were aware of Blue's shady history. Indeed, going back to the Smogon Frontier win, one of the Frontier brains was Iconic, who was one of Blue's closest friends, who at the time gave Blue a free win for the tournament. This was investigated, but suddenly a log of the battle was produced and the controversy was covered up. Of course, even back then, there had been a few who knew that the game had been a fraud. It was even publicly alluded to, albeit cryptically. See Goki's post calling Blue the fraud champ, and then congratulating the actual wins, and then Reach Zero leaving a message on Iconic's wall saying the only reason he hadn't infracted him was because he couldn't give him the kind that never expired. So yes, some of these players said, I absolutely can believe that Blue would cheat. There was also Blue's lesser known, unproven but strongly suspected involvement alongside several others in a case of impersonation and team stealing in the World Cup of Pokemon Finals the following year. There were similar rumors of Blue having received ghosting help when playing in the Smogon Premier League despite costing a record amount. But simply, it didn't seem that strange that Blue would do this. The community really started fracturing once legendary rabble-rouser and blunder associate CTC made a controversial post that voiced many's concerns. And you didn't have to know, as CTC didn't, the secrets of the tournament scene to see the enormous number of coincidences that pointed to Blue. There were 2 camps. On the first side, you had White Knights, as they were referred to, or those who stepped up to defend Styles' honor. And on the other side, there were those that thought Blue was clearly up to something. And some of the latter camp went too far, not gonna lie. An unofficial task force of Blue doubters nicknamed the Scooby Gang was formed after the Round 4 series that had prompted the first wave of conspiracy theorists that were suddenly looking a lot more credible in retrospect. Funnily, Style had defended herself, giving her backstory as having gotten into the game through clubs at her school, Stony Brook University in New York. Now, the Scooby Gang investigated the Facebook page and even contacted the owner looking for some.
So Style, quote, was also defending herself. If it turns out that Style really was Blue this whole time, that just proves that it proves what girl really stands for, right? A guy in real life. I'm starting to see it now. It's gonna happen, isn't it? Style and Blue are the same person, aren't they?
Someone named Sabrina, which was the name Style had given. This was, of course, a horrifying violation of privacy, but they wound up not finding anyone by that name. However, this still didn't prove anything. Style and Blue's IP addresses didn't match either. Blue was known to be from California, but that didn't surprise anyone. There was one thing even the most suspicious of Blue couldn't quite figure out, though. What's the motive? That's what many defended Blue with. What does Blue actually gain from this? Those suspicious of Blue were in agreement that the goal was clearly for Style to win the tournament and become a top player. However, it can't be revealed that it was Blue because then the result is nullified. So is this just Blue's new account? A new account doesn't require cheating, but does take some time to get established in the tour scene. So was this just a way to speedrun that? Or what if it was revealed to be Blue as some way of proving that they were better than McMegan or all of those old Gen 4 players? Of course, this would seem hollow, seeing as it was accomplished through cheating, but then if it wasn't revealed to be Blue, the perception would be that Style was this prodigy who came out of nowhere and schooled everyone to unprecedented degrees. The player Blue most wanted to topple, Earthworm, had made many battlers, even great ones, look silly in his dominant rise to the top. He seemed like an unstoppable robot at times, impervious to mistakes, but even he had never humiliated so many of the game's best to such degrees, over and over, with such ludicrously genial specificities. To be perceived as ahead of even Earthworm seemed like enough reward. The possibilities were enough to
Style being his sister, and you know, and if it turns out that Style really was just a girl, you know, suddenly rising to the top, it wouldn't surprise me if her motivation was to try and make a name for female players, right? Because not many people take competitive female players seriously because there's just not that many of them. It is, you know, it's unfair, it's sad, but that's just how life is, you know. That's never a cause to cheat. So I guess we're about to find out, you know, either Style was Blue or Style was just Blue too close to the sun.
make your head spin, but the evidence was missing until finally it wasn't. Even further behind the scenes, the tournament director CL and funnily enough McMegan had been conducting an internal investigation into Style. It was long and complex, but here's the gist. Someone anonymous claimed to be a longtime Pokemon player and friend of Style in real life, being willing to physically meet people to prove it. This anonymous friend claimed to have helped Style in the early rounds of the tournament. And
I'm so bad at games. Y'all saw me in Hades yesterday, completely flailing about and panicking. How many times did I stand still in an action-packed game? I'm terrible at games.
even shared the account with her. This wasn't allowed, but was minor in the grand scheme of things. McMegan and CL thus asked for more information about Style, and long story short, both Style and her friend mentioned they had a Google document which they used to prepare for her games. Seeing as this document could potentially clear Styles' name, McMegan asked for and received full access to it. The doc seemed to have useful information, but McMegan checked the revisions tab, and the oldest revision was from March 16th, aka the 5th round of the tournament, not the very beginning of the tournament, which had been in January. This document thus proved nothing, and it was only after this discovery that McMegan was then told that the information in this document had actually been moved there from an original older one, whose revision timestamps, which cannot be manually tricked, were supposed to go back to the beginning of the tournament. McMegan asked for access to this document, but was refused on account of it containing details of Style and her friend's personal.
Whoopsie daisy. You probably didn't expect them to check the revision history, did you? So we're in the end game now. We're about to find out.
This was accepted as a legitimate reason, but even beyond this, there were more issues. None of the information Style and her friend provided actually proved they were legitimate. They actually led to more suspicious coincidences coming to light. McMegan asked Style for paste spins of all her teams, and the paste spin of her round 1 teams was linked to another paste spin, which happens when you use the clone this paste feature. What
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, Pikachu's, but you guys aren't actually. Oh, this sounds so mean, but you guys aren't that good at Smash Brothers or Mario Kart. You remember my friend Nathan? Yeah, I thought I was good, but then Nathan, you know, when I played Smash Brothers against him, he schooled me good. He actually knew how to play the game. I had my butt handed to me on multiple occasions. I was humbled that day, where I thought I was good, but then I saw what a good player actually looked like, and then that's what inspired me to go easy on you guys. Yeah, you know, it's one thing to brag about wins against unskilled players, right? You know, it's not really fair. They're not that good at the game, which is, you know, shamefully something I used to do. Like, I would never go easy on them. You shouldn't brag about victories against unskilled players. It's just not good. What
wasn't the
happens here?
paste spin her round 1 teams had linked to? Well, the team that CBV used against her in the Hidden Power Fire Manaphy game, of course. There was also a link between Style and another publicly unnamed player in the form of Hostmask on Internet Relay Chat, or IRC, the default chat program in the days before Discord. Technicalities aside, it's not the kind of thing you can fake by changing your IP. With all these incredibly suspicious coincidences, the active withholding of the crucial evidence in the previously mentioned Google Doc that could have potentially validated the matches having been played without cheating was thus considered jurisdiction for disqualification from the tournament. Style was DQ'd from the finals. A bracket recreation was done instead, leading all Style's opponents to play each other. In the end, the winner was White Queen, the one player who hadn't played Style. Some players thought it was strange how accepting Style was of the decision. After all, if you were a legitimate player and were DQ'd under such circumstances, it would be the mother of all meltdowns. But shortly afterwards, Blue came forward and admitted to helping Style cheat. And shortly after that, they admitted Blue was in fact Style. More evidence previously kept secret by McMegan and CL eventually came to light. The new Google Doc didn't have any copy and paste, but was instead a complete forgery, and the old doc had never existed, though there were also attempts made to fake its existence.
Okay, yeah. Blue was styled this whole time. That's one way to make yourself remembered, even in infamy. Yeah, at first Blue said that he, quote, helped style, but then admitted to being style.
CL
Wow.
also managed to gain access to the round 5 teams, namely the Nasty Pass to Mega Ampharos, which induced EV spreads that were utterly preposterous. The Mega Ampharos had agility, and yet not enough speed EVs to outrun something as basic as base 100 speed Pokemon like the Mega Charizards. Instead, it was just fast enough to naturally outspeed everything on Radiant Heroes team except Cresselia, which it couldn't outrun unboosted anyway. While it seems strange for an innocent person to lie and forge evidence, and to use such an absurd team right down to the EV spread, there was still no clear link to Blue. But remember that IRC host mark? Yep, the user that shared it with Style was in fact Blue. However, the confession was a spotlight, because the paste spins Blue posted finally revealed the motivations behind the whole affair. Long story short, everyone had assumed Blue was a man, as was the default in those days. But Blue now revealed that she was a woman. She had also become overwhelmed with the pressure that came with being such a top player, with such high expectations from herself and everyone else. In an attempt to get away from that pressure, as well as being able to play with her true female identity, she created Style in hopes of being able to retire the Blue name and the baggage that came with it. Why the cheating? Well, because it would have led Style to being accepted in the tournament scene. Style and Blue were both permanently banned.
Okay, I didn't see that coming. Blue was a girl this whole time, and she tried to like start over, being known from day one as a woman instead of everyone assuming that she was a guy. Pretty much, yeah. Well, I don't know if Blue was pretending to be a guy. Maybe just a lot of people assumed that she was a guy. I mean, people see my username Faye. Do you know how many times I've been called a dude, even though the word Faye is clearly written out there? I don't know, but you know, people just make the assumption, you know. For all they know, my username is randomly generated. Almost similar to the plot of Victor Victoria, yeah. A woman pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman. It all loops back. It's all a perfect loop. Do not bring up the other lady. Do not. This is a family-friendly stream. Do not bring up the other lady. Do not bring up the other Scarlet. Okay, but still, that is a twist. That's quite a twist I didn't see coming. Blue was a woman this whole time.
For the absurdly long list of offenses committed that include match fixing, abuse of admin privileges, offering assistance under false pretenses, illegally obtaining information on the moves that their opponent was going to make, and entering with an alternate account. There's much to be seen in the story of Style. The immense pressure of the tournament
Yeah, they take this stuff very seriously. Very seriously.
scene, exacerbated by the immense hostility and immaturity of the boys club at the time, that made one of the most prominent players even hide their gender for over half a decade. Of course, there were some that were suspicious of even this, knowing Blue's incredibly manipulative nature, especially since after the reveal, there was an outpouring of sympathy and even some calls for forgiveness. Those who had to play Style, though, were less big-hearted, as they had been so thoroughly deceived, and had been subjected to abject humiliation on the big stage in front of their community and peers. There's cheating, and then there's this. In a way, it's the ultimate mystery, because there's no way of knowing for sure. What we can focus on is simply what we do know for sure, and the rest is to decide for ourselves.
Yeah, that is mysterious.
And thank you so much to our platinum patrons. Thank you to Amphozenus,
Patrons.
Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Corman, Daniel Isbees, Eric Dissing, Funky, Glitcherton, Howl, Jack G, King Yabber, Nightfall, Megamon VGC, Mojo Game Slayer, Nurse Jake, Pretzel SP, Sojiro Sakura, Spavoon, Gylaria, Soras and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, Stoneface Colin,
all the video while we're
Kiboflu,
waiting.
Wardeen, for their major support of our video.
Yeah, that's a video for y'all. That was quite a tale. A wild ride. I did not see that ending coming. Oh my gosh. Yeah. The movie you're thinking of is called She's the Man, Eleiko, which followed a similar premise. Not quite cheating, but you know, you had a female soccer player or football player. In America, we call it soccer. But you know, she wanted to enter the tournament, but because she's a woman, she wasn't allowed. So she took the place of her twin brother at a male school to enter the football tournament from there. I wonder why Style Blue went through all that. It's so bizarre. If you wanted to start over, it's gonna sound so sexist, but it's just like a woman, isn't it? To be a bit dramatic about it, about a rebirth, you know. I don't want to be remembered as Blue. I want to be remembered as my true self. I'm gonna come back to life as Style, and no one will ever know I was Blue. At the time, there was pressure. There's like this perceived notion of sexism in gaming that, you know, oh, you don't like me because I'm a woman, when that's that's pretty rarely the case. Sure, you get some sexist jerks out there, but in most cases, gamers are naturally pretty welcoming. So I don't know if Blue if just personally faced a lot of bullying herself, but all gamers were like that. Yeah, Blue honestly should have come forward and said that she was a girl in the first place. Yeah, at the beginning, you know, for sure, people passively assumed that Blue was a guy, but yeah, but you know, gamers don't care. They don't care what gender you are. They care about how good you are at the game, and if you're fun to play against and stuff. Gender is rarely a factor. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it calls into question how skilled she really is, right? I mean, the only reason she had those victories was because, you know, she scouted a scissor team and then built the rock team to counter them, right? Because her teams were very specifically built, and the Blue was fixing. Well, Blue fixed the tournament. You know, she would have arranged it in a way to make sure that she can win against these highly skilled players and cause an upset and cause a stir. You know, the people are saying down here about this. We should have known. Red's rival was always going to be Blue. But in Blue's defense, he never cheated, right? At the very least. You know, Blue was your rival and a jerk, but, you know, he never cheated. For some people, that's not good enough, though, Pikachu. So, some people, you know, they consider losing the ultimate failure. So, you know, if they can't win legitimately, they'll win a different way. You know, who cares how I played? I won. That kind of thing. Yeah, some people just can't be proud of their efforts. I don't understand why, but, you know, if you try, that's enough. And, you know, even if you failed, you know, that's still amazing. You know, most people don't even try. You know, you should be happy that you failed because you at least tried. Not sure it's another story if maybe you failed multiple times, you know. Sure, it gets a bit crushing, I get it. But, you know, not many people have the mental fortitude to overcome that. Yeah, exactly, Pikachu, exactly. Yeah, sure, you never reached Unreal, but still, you reached a pretty high rank, a diamond rank, and beat an Unreal game. Yeah, that's something to be proud of, even if you're not the best of the best. Oh, that's also a good point, Wolf. That's also true. That would suck to always just miss it by a mark. If you have one loss too many and the frustration gets to your head, yeah, you know, wanting to be remembered no matter what it takes. That's a pretty vicious motivator right there. Your girl boss too close to the sun. This is like hearing "shoot for the moon." Even if you miss, you'll land them on the stars. And going okay before jettisoning yourself directly into the sun. Well, she did succeed at being known as the best cheater of her era. There we go. Yeah, look at that. If you look at cheating in video game competitions, you'll see a shockingly common reality. People will cheat extensively just so they can win the meaningless internet accolade. What's the point is never a good question to ask, because the point is the accolade, the internet accolade. To just have your name out there just because. Oh my goodness gravy. Yeah, and yeah, the funniest part about all this is, as far as I'm aware, there's no money on the line. Buddy nuked their whole reputation just for the love of the game. That was a wild ride from start to finish, though. I can't believe that. It's one thing to want to be the best, like no one ever was, but that was a good video for discussion. Did I link it already? I linked it to you guys, right? Yeah, I did link it to y'all. Alright, yeah. Make sure to watch it yourself and give it a like, too. That was a thread from 6 years ago about Blue/Style tried to return. You know, all of this happened back in 2015, over 10 years ago. If she truly learned her lesson, and you know, if she really is sorry, and if she wants to start over legitimately, I mean, some people say once a cheater, always a cheater, right? Maybe it's the girl in me, but I would give her one more chance, right? Yeah, because all of this happened in 2015. You know, 11 years ago. It's been over a decade. I don't know. If I were Smogon, I would give her a second chance. But they take cheating very, very seriously over there. So it's not too surprising if they didn't allow her to come back. Unfortunately, that's how it goes, right? That's how it goes. So I'm generally a forgiving person, you know. If it were up to me, I would say, sure, you get another chance. But competitive players, they feel differently about it. Which is understandable. It does happen. Yeah.